America and Pakistan have a rocky relationship these days. However, they've had four partnerships of convenience in the last 75 years. Each of these four eras of partnership between the United States and Pakistan has caused trouble for India. From the 1965 and 1971 wars to the development of Pakistan's nuclear program, strong US-Pakistan ties have led to a number of crises to the detriment of India's national security and foreign policy. We take a look at the history of the US-Pakistan relationship and its impact on India. Partnership number 1, 1954 to 1965. The first US-Pakistan partnership began in the 1950s when the Cold War between the United States and the Soviet Union for mastery of global politics began to heat up. US President Dwight D. Eisenhower was in search of allies in the fight against the Soviet Union and communism. While India was America's first choice, Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru's policy of non-alignment meant that New Delhi was not keen to take sides in the Cold War. However, Pakistan was keen to take India's place in America's regional strategy. Pakistan's leaders told America that the newly formed country would need weapons and economic aid from Washington in return for fighting communism. However, Pakistan's goal was to use those weapons against India. America's Central Intelligence Agency wrote in an assessment at the time that Pakistan's desire for US weapons was motivated largely by a desire to strengthen Pakistan's military position vis-a-vis India. Despite knowing this, America signed a defense agreement with Pakistan in 1954 and gave it $425 million over 5 years to equip 5 military divisions with tanks and jet fighters, among other equipment. Despite a military takeover in 1958 by General Ayub Khan, the United States continued to back Pakistan's army, which in turn felt that it could take on India now that it had Washington's support. After the 1962 war between India and China, Pakistan's military was increasingly convinced that India was vulnerable. American equipment like Patton tanks and F-104 fighters convinced the country that it had the military edge against New Delhi. This confidence in its military capabilities and the political support of Washington were among the key factors that led the Pakistan Army to launch the 1965 India-Pakistan War. This war caused the end of the first US-Pakistan partnership of convenience. While the US had consistently believed Pakistan's assurance that it would not attack India, Washington now cut off military aid to both India and Pakistan. Partnership 2, 1969 to 1977. The second US-Pakistan partnership did not take long to begin. In 1969, Richard Nixon took office as President of the United States. Nixon and his National Security Advisor Henry Kissinger began a second marriage of convenience with Islamabad. The Nixon administration's goal was to normalize America's relationship with communist-controlled China. However, Washington did not have diplomatic ties with Beijing and needed a partner to facilitate its conversations with China. Nixon and Kissinger chose Pakistan and its military dictator Yahya Khan to reach out to Beijing. In return for acting as America's go-between with China, the Nixon administration gave Pakistan tactical fighter aircraft and bomber aircraft, among a host of other weapons platforms. Further, America continued its support for Yahya Khan's military regime, even as it began a crackdown on Bengali parties in East Pakistan, the most prominent of which was Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's Awami League. Even as West Pakistan's military committed widespread atrocities to control East Pakistan, the Nixon administration continued its support for Yahya Khan. America's interest was only to ensure that its outreach to China would continue through Pakistan. This support for Islamabad's objectives acted directly against India's interests, which was struggling with a massive refugee crisis from Bengal, and was also working to support an insurgency against the Pakistan Army's rule. Once the 1971 war began, Nixon and Kissinger illegally provided millions in military aid to Pakistan in order to help it stem the tide of insurgency. As Indian forces gained the upper hand, the duo also tried to persuade China to move troops on the border with India to scare New Delhi into calling off its military operations. Finally, and most infamously, they sent the USS Enterprise, an American aircraft carrier, to the Bay of Bengal to pressure India diplomatically and militarily. After this, the partnership between the United States and Pakistan cooled, since Washington was able to successfully establish diplomatic ties with Beijing. Partnership 3, 1979 to 1990. After the Nixon and Kissinger years, the US-Pakistan ties struggled somewhat. This was especially true under President Jimmy Carter, whose distaste for Pakistan's human rights record hurt bilateral ties. However, in 1979, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and this made Pakistan a frontline state in the battle against communism. This led America, under Presidents Carter and Reagan, to rebuild close ties with Pakistan to equip the Afghan Mujahideen to fight Soviet troops. That was the beginning of the third US-Pakistan partnership, which was especially damaging for India's national security interests. First, this third partnership led to the rise of Pakistan's Inter-Services Intelligence, which was a branch of its military. While America and the CIA poured money into fighting the Soviets, it was Pakistan's ISI that was responsible for forming, equipping, and running the Mujahideen from day to day, with little oversight from the United States. Billions in American and Saudi Arabian funding during the 1980s turbocharged the Inter-Services Intelligence, with funds that allowed it to grow and become a menace to India's national security. The US also turned a blind eye to Pakistan's rapidly progressing nuclear program. Since the 1970s, Washington had suspected that Islamabad was hiding crucial details about its nuclear program. Although Pakistan repeatedly stated that it was not developing nuclear weapons, US intelligence agencies were certain that Islamabad was rapidly developing its program. However, President Reagan turned a blind eye to these activities because confronting Pakistan would have meant losing it as an ally in the war against the Soviet Union, or at least that's what Washington thought. That decision allowed Pakistan to continue its path to nuclear weapons development, which had profound security implications for India. However, this third partnership also ended after the Soviets withdrew from Afghanistan in 1989. By 1990, the United States could no longer ignore that Pakistan was lying about its nuclear program and cut off aid. The fourth partnership, post 9/11. The 1990s were a period of US-Pakistan estrangement. However, the September 11, 2001 terror attacks on New York and the subsequent invasion of Afghanistan to defeat the Taliban meant that once again, America needed Pakistan. This new partnership created new problems for India. The US, under President George W. Bush, went out of its way to provide advanced military equipment to Pakistan. This included the F-16 fighter jet, which Washington first gave to Pakistan in the 1980s. While Pakistan's Air Force claimed that it would use these jets in counter-terrorism operations, it was clear that the F-16s were aimed at India. As one prominent US politician joked, using F-16s to bomb terrorists is like hitting a fly with a sledgehammer. However, the Bush administration helped Pakistan pay for F-16s through funds that were supposed to be used specifically for counter-terror activities. As expected, those F-16s have been used in military engagements with India, most recently in 2019 after both countries clashed after the Balakot airstrikes. The US also pushed Pakistan to crack down on terror, but only to a point. Like with the war with the Soviets in the 1980s, America could not afford to lose Pakistan as a partner in order to conduct operations in Afghanistan. During the fourth US-Pakistan partnership, India also repeatedly faced terror attacks, from the December 2001 Parliament attacks to the 26/11 Mumbai attacks. Pakistan's intelligence agencies like the ISI have been suspected of playing a key role in a number of these attacks. While Washington routinely condemned these attacks, it was also capable of doing little to restrain Pakistan's actions. In the end, a strong axis between Washington and Pakistan has typically spelled trouble for New Delhi. However, while India and America have built an ever stronger partnership in the last few decades, Pakistan's relationship with the United States has suffered, with no signs of improvement. Despite their brief partnerships of convenience, the United States and Pakistan have been unable to forge a lasting diplomatic and political accord. That, at least, has been a positive for New Delhi.